here today. My name is Tom Connect in the Political Science Department, and I am pleased to welcome Congressman Frank Wolf and Ambassador Tony Hall to Westmont College. Their discussion today is entitled Friendship Across the Aisle, Bipartisanship in the Pursuit of Justice, Human Rights, and Religious Freedom. Some much appreciated talk in an era of increasing partisanship and rancor. So I thank them for being here today. I'm also pleased to introduce our moderator for this afternoon, former Westmont student and one of my favorite people of all time, Tyler Castle. Tyler is the manager of the academic programs at the Value and Capitalism Project at the American Enterprise Institute, a public policy think tank in Washington, D.C. And AEI has been nice enough both to put on this event and to spring for a lot of the lunches. So thank you. Tyler is a graduate of Westmont College with a degree in political science, a former John Jay Institute fellow, and he's interned for the Values and Capitalism and Congressman Bill Huizenga, and he also blogs on issues of politics, society, and faith. So Tyler will introduce our speakers and will moderate our discussion, so please join me in welcoming Tyler Castle.
Favorite person of Dr. Tom Connect is a big honor, so I can die happy now. Just wanted to mention real quick, so like he said, I'm from the American Enterprise Institute, and one of the things that we do as an organization is try and foster substantive conversations about public policy, economics, and faith on college campuses. If you want to learn more about that, I'll pass around this little sign-up info sheet, no pressure, but would love to get some of you involved with what we're doing. But like Dr. Connect said, we're really honored to have two statesmen and people who are really trying to bring about the kingdom of God through their lives and through the work that they did in Congress. To my left, immediate left, is Tony Hall, who is a leading advocate for hunger relief programs and improving human rights conditions in the world. He's been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times. In February 2002, President George W. Bush asked him to serve as the United States ambassador to the United Nations Agencies for Food and Agriculture. After being nominated, he was confirmed by the U.S. Senate and sworn in by Secretary of State Colin Powell in September 2002 and retired in April 2005. Prior to his diplomatic service, Ambassador Hall represented the 3rd District of Ohio, Dayton, in the U.S. Congress for almost 24 years. He is currently serving as the Emeritus Executive Director of the Alliance to End Hunger, which engages diverse institutions in building the public and political will to end hunger at home and abroad. And you can read more about his work and his life in his book, Changing the Face of Hunger. So welcome, Tony Hall. And then next to him is Frank Wolf, who's the Distinguished Senior Fellow of the 21st Century Wilberforce Initiative, a newly created religious freedom advocacy group, and he's also the first Wilson Chair in Religious Freedom at Baylor University. Before that, Wolf served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 1980 to 2014. That's a long time. He is the author of the International Religious Freedom Act, which created the International Religious Freedom Office at the U.S. Department of State and established the bipartisan, independent U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF. Wolf is also the author of the legislation to create a special envoy at the State Department to advocate for religious minorities in the Near East and South Central Asia. Wolf founded and served as co-chairman of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission, a bipartisan organization comprised of nearly 200 members of Congress who work together to raise awareness about international human rights issues. His memoir, Prisoner of Conscience, focuses on some of the work he has done. And let's welcome Frank Wolf. So as you can tell, they've done a lot to change the world for the better. How many of you hope someday to change the world, make it a better place? Okay, hopefully all of you. That's what they taught me at Westmont to do, at least. And if you think about the things that you need to do that, I think one of them obviously is education, but another thing that we really need is friendship, and that's really what their story is about. It's about prayer and friendship. Ambassador Hall and Mr. Wolf, thank you for being here this afternoon. I want to start this conversation toward the beginning of your story, when you first became friends, when you started meeting together regularly with a handful of other members of Congress from both sides of the aisle to pray. Can you tell us about that time, how it got started, and what it meant to you?
Well, we started, I think, it must have been about 32 years ago. We were both members of Congress, myself being a Democrat, Frank a Republican. And it was difficult at first because, you know, we didn't know each other, and we knew that if we were to get together based on issues, based on the way we were voting, we probably wouldn't stay together very long. Because oftentimes Frank would vote one way, I'd vote the other. But we had some good friends who kind of mentored us and said that, look, don't bring political issues into your relationship right away. Don't talk about these issues. Just come together, pray together, read the scripture together, get to know each other. And if you get a chance, have dinner and see what happens. And so we did. And what's interesting is that we have become very good friends. And as a result of, you know, when you pray together and when you bring Jesus into the conversation, it's pretty hard to get up and get mad at one another and go to the floor of the house and start arguing. And as a result of doing this, not talking about issues right away, what happened is that over time we began to trust one another. And that's when things really begin to happen. Is when you begin to trust, when you begin to be vulnerable with one another, when you begin to really pray, read the scripture, when you begin to relax and let God start to work on you, and then you can start to do things together. And we found that we had a lot of interest, a lot of common interest. Our wives began to know one another, and we have this great relationship of a Democrat and a Republican supporting one another. We still think differently about a lot of different issues, but we think alike on a lot of issues. And we've worked together in Congress. We have passed a lot of legislation together, and it's been an amazing relationship.
I had run for Congress in 1976, and lost, and then ran again in 1978, lost again, and then won in 1980. And my district is what you call a targeted district, meaning the Democrats wanted to take me out because I had defeated an incumbent member. And so the thought is, and the district is Northern Virginia, for those of you who've been to Washington, the National Airport and Dulles Airport were both in my congressional district. So the thought of me sitting in with a Democratic member and sort of open up your heart and tell things where he could then run out to the Democratic campaign committee and say, you know, Wolf is really, you know, having a problem here or there. It was very uncomfortable at first. And in our group was current Senator Dan Coates, who went to the Westmont of the Midwest. He went to Wheaton College. And Bob McEwen, who's I think went to Wheaton, and his wife went to Wheaton, and Tony and myself. But coming out of it, when you, as Tony said, when you meet with one another, pray with one another, our family become very close. My wife and his wife are in a small group together who've been praying with each other and praying for the First Lady for years. And we worked on a lot of issues together. We traveled together, and so it has been very, very good. And I think it's much of what I did in Congress really flourished as a result of that. And so had I not been in the small group, I think my career pattern would have been dramatically different.
Both of you spent your careers fighting for the vulnerable. And as you said, your friendship was central to that. And it really started with a trip to Ethiopia in 1984, which you talked about in both of your memoirs. Could you tell me about how that trip happened and how your perspective changed after seeing what you saw in Ethiopia?
At the time, I was chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger. I was chairman of the International Division, and it was incumbent upon me to travel and to see things that were going on in the world and kind of report back to Congress as to what I was seeing and to see if we could help in any way. Ethiopia in the early 1980s was facing this horrendous famine. It's just one of the worst famines probably in the last 50, 60 years. And 7,000 people were dying every day. And so I decided I needed to take a look and find out what was happening and try to understand this. And so I went to Ethiopia and visited the Sisters of Charity, which is Mother Teresa's organization, and I was up country and came into this clinic that was probably no bigger than this stage down here. And before I got into the clinic, there were thousands of people outside. They were all starving and looked terrible and kind of just dragging themselves, a lot of them just lying on the ground because they had been walking for days thinking that there might be food or medicines or blankets, something to help them. And they came to this small clinic and there was nothing in it except 2 nuns. And as soon as I, walked in, on the outside walking in, people thought I was a doctor. And they began to hand me their dead babies, thinking that I some way could bring them back to life. And I saw maybe 25 children die in about 15 minutes. I never got over that. And for the next 3 days, I traveled around Ethiopia, seeing this terrible famine and death. And that has stuck with me. And I came back from that experience wanting to change the world. And I've been working on it ever since. When I came back, I think the first, excuse me for my phone, I can turn this thing off. And I came back and the first thing I did is I contacted Frank. I said, Frank, you got to go see this in Ethiopia. This will change everything in your life. And Frank, he went and got on the plane and went to Ethiopia to see it.
I had never been out of the country before I got elected to Canada, Congress, except for going to Canada once. And if you look at my career, the first 4 years, my newsletters are all federal employees. The CIA is in my district. Most federal employees live in my congressional district. It's the Northern Virginia suburbs. And also transportation, metro, if you've been to Washington and different things. And so I didn't know much about this. I had been campaigning in the Division of Motor Vehicles at Tyson's Corners. And if you're a politician and want to see a crowd, go to DMV because they're waiting to get their license out and shake their hands. And a young woman said, are you seeing what's going on in Ethiopia? And I said, well, yeah, I had. And she had worked for World Vision. She said, would you go? And I said, yeah, didn't think too much of it, kind of moved on. When Tony called me, I had just gotten on appropriations committee, and I said, can I go? And so I jumped on a plane a few days later, flew to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. Again, never been out of the country, by myself. And I couldn't get up to the famine area. And there was a guy named Blaine Harden, who still writes for the Washington Post. And he wrote a story, which was kind of devastating. He said that I was, keep in mind, a major famine. He had me eating pizza in the Hilton Hotel, which I was, because, as you know, Ethiopia was run by the Italians for a long time, and they get pretty good pizza, actually. But I was trying to get up, and I couldn't get up. And it was a devastating piece. We've since become friends. And World Vision had an airplane come up. And they said, would you want to come up with us? So I jumped on the World Vision airplane. It was the very same Twin Otter that the BBC camera crew had flown on months before, where they broke the story. We went up to Alamata and Coram, the same places where Tony was. And it was, what we saw was what Tony said. And at the end, I said, can I stay here and spend the night, with the idea that you get some sense? And this embassy said, no, you can't. And there was a guy named Bob Latta, L-A-T-T-A, who was from Monrovia, was from this area. He worked for World Vision. He said, if you stay, I will stay. And we stayed. And that night, a rainstorm came, and the plane couldn't come back to pick us up. We were in a hut, corrugated, and it was a life-changing experience. I went out with a guy, a Dutch doctor named Peter, and the woman would come out and wail in the morning with her children, and so that changed the direction of my time in Congress. So when you look at the newsletters, et cetera, from 85 on, you see I still did federal employees because obviously I represented them. I still did transportation, but I did these other issues. So that call from Tony, and you would not have gotten the call because it's two people, different parties, and so that was kind of a defining. Also, it had an impact. I have 5 children, and all of my children have worked abroad, have gone abroad, and done that. So it really had a big impact on me and on my family. And so being part of a group, a covenant group, where you pray with one another, you learn to trust one another, was really, was a life-changing event.
And it wasn't just a perspective shift. You actually came back and dedicated your lives to fixing these things and fighting these issues. Ambassador Hall, in 1993, the House of Representatives abolished the Select Committee on Hunger, for which you served as the chairman for 4 years. And in response to them abolishing this Committee on Hunger, you fasted for 22 days. Tell us about how that happened and what came of it.
Well, I was devastated. I mean, this committee was my life in Congress. I love the issue of hunger. I love humanitarian aid. I was traveling around the world. I was working in my own district. We were passing laws relative to what to do overseas to help hungry people. I thought we were really doing some excellent work, and New York Times called us the conscience of the Congress. And anyway, Congress decided to eliminate my committee because they said, we've got to start living within our means, and we're going to start cutting things, and we had high deficits, and they said we're going to start with this committee, and we're going to give all the money back to the American people, and they didn't give the money back to the American people, they kept it. Spread the money around to the other committees. I was devastated, and went home and told my wife. I said, Jan, you're not going to believe what happened. And I said, I'm going to quit Congress. I said, I can't stand to be with these people. It's Congress, they don't care about these issues, and they've just eliminated the only committee that deals with the issue that I care about. And she said to me, did you ever think about fasting? And she read me something she had just read or just heard about. It was from the book of Isaiah 58, which is a great chapter on fasting. It's probably the chapter on fasting in the Bible. We read it, talked about it, called some friends. What do you think? I'm thinking about fasting. And so a couple of days later, I went before Congress and said, look, you don't care about the issue of the poor, the sick, the hungry. You just eliminated the only committee that deals with the issue. I'm going to fast. I'm not going to eat anything. I'm just going to drink water. And I don't know how long I'm going to do this, but I'm going to wait until something good happens. Well, you could have heard a pin drop. It must have been, I did it outside the Capitol. The cameras are pointing up at the Capitol. There must have been 22 cameras there. And people thought, he's nuts. My staff thought, he's nuts. They thought they're going to be all out of a job. I mean, they did. They thought, oh my gosh, he'll never win re-election. He's finished. Tony, and they kept saying, you'll never get re-elected. Why would you do this? People will never understand this. Anyway, but people did understand it. And what happened is that the networks and the newspapers began to write very well about this fast. The New York Times, Washington Post, the networks began to say amazing things about it. 10,000 high schools, they tell me, 200 universities began to fast with it. And a whole bunch of things happened that were just amazing. God orchestrated it. It was so strong, so powerful, so amazing. And then the thing that really got me to quit my fast after 22 days, bear in mind now, I've gone 22 days, I've not eaten a thing, just drinking water, is that the World Bank called me. The World Bank is the largest bank in the world. It's a development bank. I mean, it's billions and billions of dollars every year go out to the poor. And they said, look, we've been reading about your fast. We're going to have a conference on it. Come. We want you to make a speech. We're inviting a lot of heads of state. Jimmy Carter's coming. The Secretary General of the UN's coming. If you make a good speech, maybe we'll commit some money. So I must have made a good speech. Because they committed $100 million to the fast. And most of the money went out around the world. A lot of it to Bangladesh, to women, to do microcredit, microfinance. And a lot of that money's come back in, paid with interest, all paid back. It's gone out again and again and again. The money now is up to about $500 million. One fast. There's no legislation passed, no money appropriated, no campaign, nothing, except God. He did it all. It's the most amazing thing that I was involved with. And that was the fast of 22 days. And at first, my colleagues really didn't want anything to do with me, because they thought, this guy's nuts, he's crazy. Because no congressman ever fasted. When they saw the publicity and saw what happened, they thought, this is not bad. How can I fast with you? Well, it was already over. But it was a lovely time to fast with the Lord. It was so powerful, so strong, so exciting to see what He did. Never felt so close to Him. My wife said to me, I have never seen such a glow on you that you had for 22 days. And then she said, but now I haven't seen that glow since. But there was a glow for 22 days.
So when's the next fast? That's the So when we're addressing international hunger issues like these, I know that something that you've learned is that we have to be really careful about being passionate about bringing in money and trying to solve these issues in ways that we think are best, while being aware of what unintended consequences can come from our actions. For example, in Haiti, after the 2010 earthquake, an influx of foreign rice put local rice growers out of business. How have you, in your time working on these issues, come to realize how the consequences of what you do might make you want to do something different in how you're attacking these issues?
Well, we can overwhelm people, and we've made a lot of mistakes over the years. We've made terrible mistakes in Haiti. And over the years, we've had problems like in Egypt. We wanted to help Egypt, so they didn't have a hunger problem, but we gave them a lot of food because we wanted to get on their good side, and they ended up taking our perfectly good food and feeding it to their cattle. And when we found out about it, it was such a bad PR thing for us that we decided we've got to get smarter than this. And we have disrupted markets sometimes around the world where we have, instead of buying local food, we have taken our food into situations where, and it's disrupted local farmers where we should have bought, like in Haiti, we should have bought the food that was already there. We are, in the last 20 years, we're getting much better at that. Much better. We don't make a lot of those mistakes anymore that we made many years ago. Haiti is a different story. Haiti is a mess. It's a mess. There's probably not a town, a community in this country that doesn't have a project in Haiti. I'll tell you a story about Haiti. 25 years ago, I went to Haiti, and I was chairman of the select committee on London. I said to my people that went with me, I said, let's get a breakfast. Let's invite the top nonprofits down there that are working down there. Let's get them together. I just want to talk to them and see what they're doing and find out what's going on in Haiti. And I have since been to Haiti many times. And I said, well, let's hear what they have to say. So we had a nice talk. And I finally asked them, I said, when's the last time all of you been together? These are the ones that are doing the food, sanitation, clean water, the delivery of services. And they said, we never have been together. You've never been together. Herein lies the problem. You don't work together, you're duplicating money, services, and that's what was going on in Haiti. We have spent trillions in Haiti. I'm exaggerating, but not too far off. And we are not organized. They have taken our money and run, and there's hardly the kind of organization that we should have. We do a much better job in other countries in the world. Matter of fact, poverty has been cut in half. 35 years ago, 42,000 people were dying every day. Now it's 21,000. It's still a lot, but it's better. We are making progress. But in some countries like Haiti, it's a mess. A mess. And we could point a lot of fingers at a lot of different things that are going on, of which I prefer not to point the fingers right now. Haiti is a mess. So if you've got a project in Haiti, you better reconsider it. You better look at the money that you're putting down there.
Mr. Wolf, you've focused much of your work on advocating for religious liberty and against religious persecution across the globe. And in recent years, you focused a lot of your attention on what is happening in Iraq. Can you tell us about your trip to Iraq about a year ago and what's happening there and what needs to be done to deal with the situation there?
More biblical activity has taken place in Iraq than any other country of the world other than Israel. Abraham, I was in Nasiriyah, that's Ur. I climbed the ziggurat 2200 BC. You can see it. Daniel spent his life in Iraq. Daniel was buried in Iraq. Ezekiel was buried in Iraq. Jacob lived in Iraq. The 12 tribes of Israel lived in Iraq for 20 years. Jonah is the Nineveh Plains, Mosul, which is now controlled by ISIS. And so we're seeing literally during our generation, and of course I'm 75, I don't know how long God's going to give me to live, but I may very well live, but all of you will live to see the end, E-N-D, of Christianity in the cradle of Christendom. In 2001, there were 1.5 million Christians in Iraq. Today they're down to 200 to 250,000. And when I was there, I was with a Catholic nun, Dominican sister. She said, Mr. Wolf, and this came up over and over, does the church in the West care about us? And the answer is probably the church in the West does not care about us. There is genocide taking place in Iraq. We met with young Yazidi girls who had been kidnapped with ISIS. There are 3,000 Yazidi girls who are still with ISIS. One said she was assaulted, I'll put it that way, by a young man named Abdullah Ameriki, who was an American citizen, who used to show her on his cell phone a picture of his wife and 2 kids living here in the United States. There's genocide, and so we miss genocide in Germany, we missed genocide in Rwanda, we missed genocide in Bosnia, and we're now missing genocide. So during our lifetime, and you hear the refugee issue, most of the Christians that I met with up in the Erbil area want to stay. It's very presumptuous of us to think everyone wants to come here or come to the West. And the church, Cardinal Dolan has spoken out, Cardinal Worrell, Russell Moore, and Rick Warren, but overall, the church in the West has fundamentally failed to advocate. So here we have, during our lifetime, and it's even more stark when you think in terms of we have the internet, we have everything. We know all you have to do is go on every day and see what's taking place. So I think the very fact, so the Congress a couple months ago called it genocide in a resolution, but there's no action. So during our lifetime, during the lifetime of all of you, and there was a group in England that predicted that in 5 years, there will be no Christians left in Iraq, the cradle of Christendom. And some example, in 1950, the Jewish population of Iraq was 150,000. There was a saying, first the Saudi people, then the Sunni people. The Saudi people, the Jewish community, the Sunni people, the Christian community. When I was there, I said, how many Jewish people are left? And they said, perhaps 10 elderly individuals. So what took place to the Jewish community is now taking place to the Christian community, and yet the church in the West is absolutely silent and letting it take place there. During our lifetime, we will see the end of Christianity in the land where Daniel lived, in Babylon, and Ezekiel, and Esther, and Jonah, and we're going to see the same thing in Syria. So the very fact that we called it genocide, but we did nothing about it, I think is going to be an indictment, particularly, I think, more for the church than for anybody else here in the West.
What could students be doing to advocate for an issue like this, both while they're here, but also once they've graduated?
Well, every issue we go, we were just in Nigeria, where the Christians are being slaughtered. The most dangerous group in the world is Boko Haram. Every place we go, there, but in Iraq, the first thing they ask is pray for us. Secondly, there are groups that are working to keep the Christian community to help them. Samaritan's Purse, and the Catholic Church Dominican Sisters. Some of you, quite frankly, could take some time off, not a week, not 2 weeks, but a time off, and go work over there, the Erbil area. But there you could have your churches adopt a community. There are 50 to 60 to 70,000 Christians in the Erbil area living they live in these compartments, metal compartments. So the church in the West could, one, advocate, could call congressmen and senators in addition to praying, but thirdly, a church could actually do something by helping and adopting. And again, there are a number of groups. Franklin Graham's group, Samaritan Purse, does a tremendous job. The Dominican Sisters do a tremendous job. But I think there's a lot that you could really do. And I'll tell you, I guarantee you, to go to Erbil or to go to Tehuk and to work with the Christian community, and also in fairness to the Yazidi community, I think would break your heart, whereby then you would weep at their stories. And I think by knowing their stories, our faith becomes stronger. So there's a lot that you all could do, and there's a lot that your church could do. There's a lot that Westmont could do.
Obviously, your hearts have been for a lot of international issues and atrocities that you've seen and that you've really dedicated your lives to trying to fix and solve. But at the same time, you have local constituents. You're both congressmen who had to represent local constituents. Was there ever a tension in your advocating for these issues that in some ways are apart from the interests of your constituents? And did you ever have to have hard conversations or kind of tough relationship with your constituents because of your work on these international issues?
Yeah, I had some problems at first. After that Ethiopian trip, I just was so stunned with all those people dying that I began to travel the world, and I was so involved with the issue of hunger that I ended up going to 130 nations, and I was involved. I was legislating, I was doing this and doing that, and I was starting to get letters from my district. People were starting to say, Tony, You care more about Ethiopia than you do Main Street in Dayton, Ohio. Who needs you? Thinking, uh-oh, I got a problem. It wasn't true. But in politics, perceptions are dangerous. Because if the perception is that I am away from my district and not caring for people who voted for me, I better darn well change the perception. So I had to bring the issue back home. And we did. I got my staff together and friends together, and I said, you know and I know that this perception is wrong because we're doing a lot of stuff here, but we have got to bring this issue back home. So we brought the issue of hunger, especially humanitarian aid, so we started a lot of programs in my district of Dayton, Ohio, and we started gleaning programs where we would organize groups of people and we'd go out in the fields and pick produce that the farmers didn't want. And we started senior citizen feeding programs during the cold winter months in Ohio. And it didn't get cold in Ohio. And we started to pick up food programs from military bases and from restaurants and from country clubs of food that, was left over that they didn't want in grocery stores. And then we started lots of programs. And these programs lasted for about 20 years, 25 years. But what they did is they built a constituency. And we had lots of volunteers from corporations and businesses and more volunteers than we knew what to do with. And we also did a fast for 40 days. And for every hour you would fast, you would get people to back you up. But this is something that I borrowed from World Vision. They do that often. And we raised a lot of money locally, and it went to the local food banks and soup kitchens. And so what happened is that I built up a constituency of about 10,000 volunteers in my district. And so now, when I would go overseas, it was not a problem because they were also doing programs and working on programs in my district, and they understood that there's both domestic hunger and international hunger. And they were proud of the fact that I was involved overseas, but we were also involved locally. And because we had so many volunteers and so many people involved locally doing local programs, we were able to overcome this perception.
Yes and no. Overall, the average voter in my district, I have a very international district. The CIA is in my district. A lot of State Department people live there. I think, I had a staff that made me look good. I had one of the best staffs on Capitol Hill. And so we worked hard. Overall, once in a while you'd have somebody say something about, you went to Ethiopia, why aren't you here in Leesburg or something? But overall, no. The only problem was more from some of the business community, particularly the high-tech community. I have been a critic of China. Right now, there are Catholic bishops under house arrest in China. Xiaobo, the 2010 Nobel Prize winner, is under arrest in prison. His wife is under house arrest. There are hundreds of Protestant pastors in jail. They've taken churches, crosses off of churches. They're persecuting the Uyghurs, the Muslims in there. I slipped into Tibet in the late 90s and followed Tibet. And in the last year, 140 Tibetan monks and nuns have committed suicide. They pour kerosene on their body and they light a match. And the business community, particularly the high-tech community, wants to just be so friendly with China. You take Tim Cook who runs Apple. You probably all have an iPhone. I have an iPhone. Tim Cook, when Mike Pence signed the Religious Freedom Bill in Indiana, Mike Pence says he criticized Pence. He said there's something bad in Indiana. Well, he makes the iPhone at Foxconn, where the suicide rate among the Chinese workers is very high. Does Tim Cook ever speak out and say to the head of China, you have Catholic bishops under house arrest, you have Protestant pastors in jail, you have plundered Tibet? The Dalai Lama has said it is cultural genocide. Cultural genocide is taking place. And so the high-tech community, I opposed granting the most favored nation treaty status. I've spoken out against big law firms in town who represent the Chinese. During President Reagan's administration, no law firm, no public relations firm would have ever done business with the Soviet Union. You know, President Reagan said the words in the Constitution, the words in the Declaration of Independence were a covenant, not only with the people in Philadelphia in 1776 and 1787 when we ratified the Constitution, but was a covenant with the tank men. You remember the tank men at Tiananmen Square? A covenant with, but the high-tech community and the business community has not seen it. So that was my only, I was not well liked by the high-tech community, by the, you know, the Microsofts, the Googles, the AOLs and people like that. But overall, the average voter in my district, I had no problem, and I think they were glad to see me do what I did. But the business community sometimes not.
These are really big, complex issues that both of you have tackled in your life, and issues that won't be solved in a number of lifetimes. It took, for example, William Wilberforce 46 years to abolish the slave trade in Great Britain. And so for many of the people in this room who will likely be working on very complex, difficult issues, how do you not get discouraged and depressed when it often seems like it's one step forward, two steps backwards on these issues? What keeps you motivated to keep working on these issues when in some ways it seems like things get worse?
Well, I think I think what works for me is you bite off what you can bite off. It's when you travel and when you do things, you're always going to see something that you can do. If you turn on your television and you see a bunch of people starving in a country, your tendency is to turn the television off or turn to another station because it's too big. I can't handle it. But if you end up going there and you see the thing, you'll find something you can do. There's somebody that's in front of you. There's somebody that you can see. There's something there that you can make happen. There's some family that you can help them have a better life. And Mother Teresa taught me this. I had a chance to spend a lot of time with her. I met her maybe 8 or 9 times in my life, and she said, do the things in front of you. And when I was with her in Calcutta, the first time I met her, she took me downtown, and there was a guy lying in the street, and he looked dead to me. But he was just barely living, and she got some men to pick him up, take him back to her hospice, and she began to wash him off and clean him up and whisper to him and touch him and love him. And she came back to me later and said, look, not everybody can come to Calcutta like you, but go back and tell people to do the thing that's in front of them. What's going on here in Santa Barbara? What's in front of you? You know, this is probably the most prosperous place in the country, but you have poverty here. And you got somebody on this campus nobody's paying attention to. You got somebody that's lonely here. I think what Mother Teresa was saying, if we did what was in front of us, probably half the stuff we do in the Congress, half the stuff we do in this world, we wouldn't need to do. We wouldn't need to go if we did the thing that was in front of us. So what she's saying is do the thing that's in front of you, do it through your faith, only through your faith, and it makes all the difference in the world. If I didn't have my faith, I don't know how you do this work. It's almost impossible to do this work because you would get burnt out. This work is tough work. And the good thing about this kind of work with your faith, you could go to bed often at night and say, it's been a pretty good week. Help some people today. It's not bad. How many jobs do you get to say that? You don't get to say that with a lot of jobs in this life. But you can in this kind of work.
Well, I agree with Tony, but I want to kind of take it a little bit in a different direction. I get discouraged. And I believe I'm going to be held accountable at the end of my life. I'm going to stand before God, and He's going to say, did you do what you said? And so that's what drives me. But we're in trouble. Your generation has to know it. I believe personally we are facing economic and moral decline. You look at $20 trillion of debt. You look at the breakup of the American family. You look at 70% of the American of the world lives in a religiously repressive nation. You look at what's taking place. I mean, I don't want to go on, but so I get discouraged. And decline is a choice. It is not a destiny. There is nothing to say we will decline. But I believe we are making the choices. And so one of the reasons of being here, and I pray, your generation, I call you the baton generation. Relay races are won or lost in the passing of the baton. It isn't how fast they run, it's to how quickly you get. And so are we passing the baton to your generation? And your generation may very well be the generation that makes the difference as to whether, now do I think America is going to be here 100 years from now? Yes. Portugal is still here. Portugal is not, you know, the Portugal of the past. And so I think it's all up to you. And so I get discouraged. I go home and I see things, you know, that just, you know, break my heart and weep and I am leaving the scene, 77, soon to be 78. And so whether this nation goes to decline, and I'll tell you, I think domestically, religious freedom is being diminished. I think people in the church are afraid to speak out. I think we need more read, I'll tell you one of your assignment for today, after you go home, is read Dr. Martin Luther King's speech, a letter from the Birmingham jail. I think we need more Dr. Martin Luther Kings. I think we need Dietrich Bonhoeffers. I think we need Thomas More. I think we're going to see people in the church are going to have to be willing to go to jail. Because I think we're losing, and the church is very reluctant. I think you're going to see universities lose their tax exempt status. So there are really deep troubles. And I think the one answer is a revival. But I think your generation will sort of be the determining factor of whether or not we're always going to have America, but whether this nation will continue to be the city on the hill, the shiny city. And I'm not so sure, and we have 5 kids, we have 16 grandkids, and I think where we're going, and then I'm going to close with the Simon and Garfunkel quote that they sang in Central Park, the boxer. Man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. I think we're disregarding the rest, and I think what we're doing is we're singing a little louder so that we can't hear the cries and the complaints and the problems that are taking place around the world, but also what's taking place with regard to our own country. So your generation, the baton generation, you all will probably make a difference as to where we will be 10, 15 years from now.